Located deep within space, on the outer edges of the Milky Way galaxy. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to KWR, as I affectionately have nicknamed it, short for Knucklecast Webcast Radio. I don't know if it's the correct term. It doesn't much matter because it's my show and I can call it pretty much whatever the heck I want. So yeah, I've been thinking about different stuff, what to talk about and such, and I think I'm going to try to get into a couple topics, but I'm doing this just off the heat of the moment. Popped in my head and I just felt like talking about it. And, some people aren't going to like it, some people are. I personally find this subject extremely interesting, and this subject is the paranormal. Now, let me preface this with my background in religion and my family's background in religion. I was conceived by essentially 60s hippies. I'm conceived in the late 70s in literally an old orange hippie van, carpeted from top to bottom with carpet that was to simulate grass on the bottom and hills on the side and sky on the top. So my parents are complete ex-hippies. They're not hippies anymore. They grew up out of that. But anyway, my dad was raised as a Christian. My mom was raised as a Catholic. But as they grew up, they both kind of veered different ways. My dad basically is an atheist now, and my mom, at the time of my birth, was actually a Buddhist. And right now, she's really not any religion. She's spiritual, but she's kind of like me, just interested in stuff, but don't admit that we don't know the answer. And I think that anybody that admits that they know the answer is an idiot, because how could you know the answer? You weren't there. You don't know the answer. So going back to that, I was raised without religion. My parents decided that for me and my sister at one point, if we were interested in religion, they would allow us to explore these ideas on our own without influence of elders. And over the years, I never really got into religion. I never really believed in ghosts. I never really believed in anything paranormal. Never really believed in UFOs. And I'm not saying I do believe in this stuff. It's just these days, being able to research these subjects on my own, there's just way too many people out there for way too long that have seen what we have termed as aliens or UFOs or the spirits or ghosts. So there's a lot of people out there that have experienced this stuff. And some of these people aren't idiots. Some of these people are intelligent, well-spoken, educated individuals that are researching these topics and subjects. Anyway, so getting back to my religion, I never was raised with religion, so I never had that chain, that bondage of having to think a certain way. So I've always been pretty open-minded for the most part. Now, in my earlier years, after I got out of high school, I was too busy being caught up with the average lifestyle of just partying and trying to be cool and trying to impress everyone. And it took many years. It took until my late 20s to figure out that this wasn't for me. All right, so flash forward to today and where I'm at today. Over about the last 6 months ago or so, well, it all depends. You could count it as 2 years, but I've really started researching it more diligently and vigorously over the past 6 to 8 months. But anyway, let's just say 2 years ago, I started becoming more interested in ancient history, in megalithic sites and builds, and I can thank the show Ancient Aliens for that. It reawoken a romantic view of the world that was laying dormant in my mind for quite some time. But that show sparked something. So I started researching. The way the show lays out everything, it does seem like aliens may have done this. I can't say they did or didn't. But upon doing research on my own, reading very many websites, links, pages, PDF books, and so on and so forth, I don't so much agree with the ancient aliens theory, or the ancient astronaut theory as it's technically called. I don't discount it. I don't say it's wrong or right, because when it comes to actual reality, none of us know the answer. And at this point, none of us will probably ever know the answer. So to just blatantly say, no, that is not right, or yes, that is right, I don't do that. I'm what they call a fence rider. I sit on the fence and I look at both sides, all sides, and I absorb and digest and analyze all parts of the subject. And I generally don't come to the definitive answers. Now, the reason I said I don't believe in UFOs and ghosts in general is because I have yet to witness this phenomenon on my own, with my own two eyes. So all I have to base my opinions around it is basically research done by other people. Now, since I have not witnessed this phenomena on my own, I cannot definitively say I believe it because I haven't actually seen it. But it's not that I don't believe it. I remain skeptically open-minded. Use that term. If you're someone like me, use that term because that's how everyone should think. We should be scientific, but we should also be open-minded, and we shouldn't just shoot down everything. You know, just because we say the sky's blue, that doesn't mean the sky's blue. That's just how we have defined it. So, going back to the ancient aliens and ghosts and all that, ancient aliens put me on a quest of research that led down an interesting slope that led to the possibility of lost civilizations. We term it today as an Atlantis. I kind of don't like the modern pop view on that. It could be called anything, and there's books out there, all sorts of books out there of people that have supposedly channeled these ancient beings, and they give different names, and so there's no definitive answers. But from the evidence, I have a gut feeling, a good chance that these giant megalithic structures that are located all over the world, that were made thousands of years ago, when the average one of us that are listening to the show were barbarians in Europe, rolling around in the mud and raping and killing and pillaging, these civilizations that they're not lost. These are civilizations that existed. They were able to set up and build cities of immense proportions that are amazingly astounding to even our modern technological view and frame of reference. And it fascinates me that these people, these ancient people, a lot of them didn't even have a will. A lot of them didn't even have written language. Were able to somehow carve out 30, 80, 100-ton stones, haul them, in some cases, miles without a will. They would somehow drag these, according to the mainstream archaeological view, is a lot of this, they were dragged. It was manpower. Everything was done with manpower. So they were able to drag these giant megalithic stones for however far, who knows, whatever it is, for whichever site. There's so many different sites. There's literally hundreds. You know of the great ones, the big ones. We got Machu Picchu, all around the Andes and Peru, Tiwanaku, Pumapunku. And then we got the Great Pyramids of Giza. And if you don't know this, there's actually more than just the Great Pyramids in Giza. All along the Nile plain, that fertile band, it's called the Band of Hope. There's many other pyramids. And not a lot, but there's other pyramids besides just the Great Pyramids. And that's just Egypt alone. And then we have proof of possible megalithic structures in China. And we do have megalithic structures in China. We have India, Asia, Africa, South America, even in America, North America itself. There's these megalithic structures that were built by ancient people. Now, the gut feeling I have about the lost civilization is, how did these people figure out how to do what they did? You know, as a society, we tend to build upon each other. Every generation, even since the beginning of Earth, has become more complex. Everything gets more complex, and it's going to keep continuing to get like that until we blow ourselves off the face of the planet, or we die of some sort of zombie flesh-eating disease, or what have you. It's going to constantly become more complex, and it has been. That's how it always is, and it's as long as we're alive, and this planet exists, that's how it will be. We started as microbes. We started off as subatomic particles. We build together. We become microbes. Then we become the first beginnings of life on this planet, swimming around the ocean. One day, one of these animals, if you can even call them that, walks out of the ocean and starts to go onto land, and we evolve. We get more complex over time. So these ancient people, for some reason, 3,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago, they're finding sites that are older than 10,000 years old now. And this is based on scientific research through carbon dating, C4 dating. If you don't know about carbon dating is where scientists are able to test organic material that's left at sites and date these. And they are accurate. They're not 100% accurate, but they are accurate. The only problem with that is that it is only dating organic material. It is not dating when the stones are cut. Scientists are working on ways to try to date stone carving and stone moving yet, but we cannot date them. So at this point with carbon C4 dating, it's essentially, you could go anywhere and carbon date it and you get your date and you're happy. And if it works with a timeline, that's happy. But the problem is another civilization could have moved in on this older civilization, lived there for thousands of years, made all their crap, made all their trash, left it, died off, moved off, what have you. And so we go in and we get the last of that civilization. And we get our dates, and archaeology has its timelines, its paradigms, its set ideas of the way it accepts its... archaeology is good. I love archaeology. They work scientifically, but the problem is they get their certain timeline and they have to go with it. And I don't blame them, because without proof, they cannot say one way or another. But with the carbon dating, to me, it's not good enough. You go to many of these ancient cultures, and the people today will even tell you legends of their people finding these structures before these structures were already built when they came into it. If you take anywhere along the Incan Empire in Peru, many places, we got Cusco, we got Tehuacán, like I said, Punku. All these places, Saskatchewan, all these places have these ancient, really old, gigantic looking stones. And these stones aren't put together like bricks. These stones are put together like molded pieces of clay that are fit in the funkiest shapes that you can imagine, like giant jigsaw puzzles. And the later civilizations we can clearly see they build on top of these older structures, and they become smaller stones, and you see the use of mortar. And mortar is used as a compound in between these rocks to prevent the rocks from shifting or water and what have you coming in and out of that stone. The ancient people that we really don't know as much as I believe archaeology thinks they know, they were able to create these structures without using mortar. They were able to fashion stone in such a way that you literally cannot put a razor or a piece of paper in between the joints, like is so used as a cliche in the pseudoscience world. And yes, that is amazing. That is absolutely fascinating. You can go and try to find any rock carver, stonemason, however you want to say it, and none of them will take the time to try to even start to begin to replicate these structures. It's too hard, it's too much work, and they just, quite frankly, don't know how it was done. And I'm not lying on this. This is information people can look up on their own. Now, I don't want, with that in mind, real quick, I just want to say, I'm not trying to influence people to think one way or think the other way. I'm just giving people tidbits of information that I want them to research on their own and make up their own mind on their own volition of what they feel this is. So, getting back to these structures, the newer structures look newer. You can tell that, right? So, okay, so you say, all right, so yeah, well, of course they're going to look newer. They're only 500 years old. But the people themselves at many of these Incan sites, they themselves say the legend is there was an older civilization and they found these structures. Even the Egyptians, it's legend in Egypt that Egypt was found, essentially. The Great Pyramid, the Sphinx was found. Keep the Sphinx in mind. I'm going to get to the Sphinx in a little bit, things that I find quite interesting in this. So, going back to the lost civilization, somehow these ancient people, thousands of years old, developed these techniques that are now lost today. So my theory, my ideas, my gut feeling is that they didn't develop these techniques. These techniques were passed down to them from an even older civilization. And as time progressed, that technique was lost to those people as well. So, in the case of the Incan Empire area, I believe it could be 3 or 4 civilizations that have actually come and gone within that period. A lot of people think it may be just 2, like an Atlantean civilization, but I think what it was we had a prototype civilization, a proto-civilization that was more advanced than possibly even us today, a global seafaring civilization that had a great catastrophe. All the religious books around the world talk about a deluge. A deluge is the flood, the great flood. Every religious paper, almost, I can't say everyone because I haven't read everyone, all the big ones, all the side shoots of those, they all have the legend of a great flood. And when you go back to Plato, Plato was one of the only people that brought the idea of Atlantis into the modern Roman world, which is now the world that we have inherited from the Romans. And so we have the story of Plato that supposedly, I believe it was his grandfather heard the story of Atlantis many, many years ago, and that's how Plato got his hands on the story and wrote about it. But it talks about a civilization that once existed off the coast of England, off the east coast of England, in the middle of the Atlantic. And I've always found this interesting, that we have this ancient culture called Atlantis, and we named the ocean where they may have been the Atlantic. Now, I don't know much about why we named it the Atlantic. I need to research this more, but there's literally a billion things I need to research. But I've always found that little correlation interesting. Anyway, this supposedly was a continent between America and Europe at one point. And due to global change, climate change, and seawater rising, melting of the ice caps in the North Pole, sea level has risen. It has risen many times over the life of our planet that we know right now through biology and geology and earthly history in general. Climatologists, that's what I'm looking for. We know the sea level has risen. We know that literally not countless, but I don't know the exact number, but the amount of landmass just around the coast alone on our continents where we have found sunken cities, that's just one part of it. So anyway, I digress back to Atlantis. This continent was in the middle of the Atlantic, and supposedly, according to the story, in one day and one night was sunk. There was a great catastrophe. There was earthquakes, volcano eruptions, and the continent itself literally sunk. So that's the story. There's obviously no proof to any of this. The bottom of the Atlantic Ocean has been mapped out pretty darn well. Obviously, nobody's gone down there and walked it foot by foot and seen things by person. But with technology today and sonar and ground mapping radar, we've been able to get a good idea. So supposedly that culture existed there and was literally obliterated off the face of the planet. But of course, not everybody's going to die, because maybe not everybody was on that continent. Maybe some people escaped the continent. But the theory is the survivors of whoever these ancient people were that were destroyed by this great flood, a few survivors spread across the world in different areas and would find nomadic tribes, very primitive nomadic tribes, and start to teach them the knowledge that they brought with them from their civilization. And it laid the base work for modern science, mathematics, technology, medicine, philosophy, geography, you name it. This is the theory, is that these people brought this idea and this knowledge to what we are, the modern humans. Because at this time, we were very primitive. And we were very primitive just a few thousand years ago, just a couple thousand years ago. And so, who knows when this was? Some people think it was maybe 10,000 years ago. Some people think 12, 15, upwards to 20,000 years ago or more. So these people from this lost civilization, their continent completely destroyed, spread across the globe and taught other civilizations, more primitive civilizations, their techniques, and those techniques led into the development of these megalithic sites and these cultures that are non-existent anymore. The Maya, the Inca, the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, all over the place. And they learned from these people, but over the years, that knowledge just slowly dissipated and was lost because for a long, long time, written history is not that old. In comparative to human history, especially in comparative to modern man human history, written history is not that old at all. So the theory is these, or at least my idea, not really a theory, but my idea is that over time, these ancient people that were taught from an even more ancient people slowly lost their abilities and history, be it disease, famine, war, and other cultures moved in and reused and built onto their already pre-existing cities. Even in Mexico, there is these megalithic sites everywhere. And for some reason, these people that were in our modern technological frame of reference were idiots. That's what we think. I'm not saying they are. I can't say they are because I don't know. I'm not going to say yes or no, but that's the modern view. The modern academic view is that these people were less primitive, less technologically advanced, and essentially, in a nutshell, idiots compared to us. But for some reason, we cannot emulate or simulate or copy these building techniques that these people did. And the reason for that, I believe, is because, like I was talking about, how that second or third layer that built those megalithic structures that were taught from an even older culture, because they did not have written language, their techniques and history dissipated over time. And then we have the modern, well, somewhat, I say modern, but let's say 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 500, somewhere around there. People that developed and found these other and built on top of them, their knowledge of it was essentially zero because they didn't know anything because they didn't have a written history to tell them that. So that's why they started building things smaller and using mortar, because they just couldn't figure out how these crazy people thousands of years ago did that. And so get to today, that all that knowledge has essentially been dissipated and non-existent. We live in a time where we can tell you how fast the earth is spinning, how fast the earth is moving, how fast the sun moves. We can literally dissect our planet through and through, but we can't figure out how these people built structures. Just a simple thing like that. So my theory, my idea is that, why were people all over the world building these structures at a time when modern civilization, the Western civilization, were considered barbarians and were barbarians? Why would they do that if it was not easy somehow? Right? Just listen to me for a second on this. Just because we have this view and frame of reference of what technology is does not necessarily mean there is not other versions and ideas of technology. Just sound itself. Sound can reverberate and actually move objects. Sound can shatter walls. And there is scientists out there doing studies, even with all our great technology, we can only move objects on a small scale with sound. But a good theory, I don't want to say good theory because that implements it, I think it's great. An interesting theory is that these giant objects were moved using sound, which is fascinating to me. Anyway, that just how they were built alone is a deep and amazing subject. But, boy, this isn't as easy as I thought it would be. When you start going off on your mind and start going into different ideas, it's so easy to go on another tangent. So let me get back. All right. So megalithic structures. What am I talking? Megalithic structures, so ancient civilization, lost civilization. Okay, so basically, I have an idea that there was once a great civilization that lived on our planet that was able to utilize technology in a different fashion than we have today. It wasn't possibly nuts and bolts. Maybe it was more spiritual. Maybe it was more mind altering. Who knows? We don't know, and we probably will never know. That's a sad fact, but at least we're able to speculate and try to come up with ideas and theories. Anyway, this ancient civilization was able to do things that we can't do. And that would explain why they're able to move 100-ton blocks and put them on structures that are like 30 feet up in the air, right? And if you don't know what a ton is, 1 ton is 2,000 pounds. You know, I'm terrible at imperial and metric. I don't know the differences, but if a ton is universal, I don't know. Anyway, some weighing 100 tons or more. So, I'm going to move back to Egypt now. Now, we know, people know a lot about the Great Pyramids, but I have found some interesting research on the Sphinx itself. There's groups of researchers out there that have been researching Egypt for good 40, 50, 60 years. That seriously, and with their every fiber of their soul, believe that what we are seeing as a history of ancient Egypt is actually a history that came after another history of a greater civilization. Now, going to the Sphinx itself sits in an enclosure. The enclosure is a horseshoe-style wall of, I believe it's limestone, maybe. I think it's limestone. Don't quote me on it, but I think it's limestone. It's encasing the Sphinx. At time, people believed that there was stone walls to help protect the Sphinx from sand. And anyway, along these walls is very good evidence for the water erosion of the stone itself. There's been research done by Professor Robert Schoch, and this guy isn't some druggy, hippie, nonsensical idiot. This guy is very intelligent. He has a freaking PhD. He's highly regarded. But because he's not fitting with the modern day academic paradigm, he gets outcasted. And this is evidence that he's coming on himself. Anyway, his evidence, and look this up. Look up Dr. Robert Schoch's work on the Great Sphinx, or the Sphinx's enclosure in Egypt. You'll find all sorts of cool information on this. Dr. Robert Schoch believes that there is enough evidence to show that water erosion over thousands of years has created the erosion patterns we see encasing the Sphinx itself. And you can see it on the Sphinx itself. And he gives good examples of wind erosion and water erosion. Wind erosion, put your fingers parallel to your face so they're pointing left and right. Wind erosion is the cracks in your finger. Now turn it so your fingers are facing down. Water erosion is the cracks going down, and it makes sense. Wind moves side to side, water moves down. And he has found evidence that there is, in his eyes, unrefutable evidence of water erosion in this Egyptian Sphinx, whatever. God, I just forgot what I called it. A casing, the walls around it. And it's for there to be water erosion at that degree and that level would mean that it would have to have been built. The Sphinx itself and the enclosure that it's sitting in would have had to have been built many, many thousand years ago. I can't remember the exact date. If you look up the information on Robert Schoch, he'll say it. I think it was 7,000 years ago, 8,000. Anyway, it's to the point where there was water in that area of the Giza Plateau when it was raining, and instead of sand, it was fertile plains. And for it to be like that is many, many, many thousands of years ago, long before the times that we've dated that the modern archaeological timeline has dated the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid to be from. Now, so you got that evidence of the water erosion. Now we'll look at the Sphinx. Now, if you've seen the Sphinx, everybody knows what it looks like. It looks like kind of a lion's body with a man's head on it. Now, if you've never noticed this, which it would be pretty hard not to notice, the head looks extremely out of proportion to the rest of the body. The head looks small. Now, when you're carving with stone, that's what's going to happen. If you're creating a stone structure or remodeling a stone structure, you can't, especially back then, they weren't going to be able to do what we can do today, which just slapping in and building on. They would just have to chisel it away. So their theory is, at one point, this Sphinx inside its enclosure was an actual lion's head. And the reason behind this is because at the constellation Leo at certain times rises right in front of the Sphinx to the east. And so this helps give some dating validation to the Robert Schoch's theory about thousands of years. I can't remember the exact date. 10,000, 12,000. I can't remember the exact date. Anyway, so, and then we have the Great Pyramids itself. Another researcher called Robert Bouval. I think you spell his name Bouval. I think he's French. He's done research with galactic alignments in the Great Pyramids. And there are two strange shafts that are going out of the center of the Great Pyramid. And they're pointing just to the stars. And he's done research and looked at galactic alignments. And man, he literally has like books on this subject. So it's a very deep subject. But he has come up with the idea through his computations and his research, and through using these small ports. They're just two ports that go in and out, like vents, in and out of the Great Pyramid, to line them up with certain stars that were important to ancient Egyptians. And through this, and with the correlation of the constellation Leo, and the fact that the Sphinx is cat human, which at one point was probably a lion, a full-headed lion, would move the date if you lined it up galactically for what time these planets were aligned. These stars were aligned with the two shafts of the Great Pyramid, and the rising of the constellation Leo on the eastern horizon would date the Great Pyramids to be at least 12,000 years old or older. And this is fascinating stuff. Like I said, I don't believe in all this stuff, and I do not disbelieve in all this stuff. I take it all for face value, just as I take history that's been shoved down our throats for face value. You know, we're told certain ways and certain things happen, but that does not mean they are true, people. You have to realize this. And until we can build a time machine and go back and verify what we think happened, none of this, time after time after time, history is written by the winners. You know, we know this. I don't know, for my international listeners in America, we are taught such a stupid, mundane history of ourselves throughout school, throughout at least elementary school, middle school, high school. And there's just so much more to that history, but we're not taught that because it doesn't help with the way they have socially constructed us. It doesn't help to have free-thinking people in a society where you don't need free-thinking people. The way our society is set up is that we are essentially slaves. We're slaves that can talk and think, but we're essentially slaves. We're set up from birth to go into this program where we must work, and we must pay bills, and we must pay taxes, and we must pay rent. And there's no way to avoid it besides being a homeless man on the side of the street asking for money. And they've done this on purpose to construct this system to where I feel that they've done this on purpose. You know, I can't prove anything. These are just theories. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but my theory is that with this, it's constructed as somewhat of a prison where we are so close-minded that we just accept what we're told, and that's it. That makes us feel nice and warm inside, and we don't have to think at all. And that's exactly what people that are in control of civilizations want people to do. This isn't anything new. The forefathers of America knew the state of what this world would be unless they warned us. They warned us about the banking system. They warned us about big government. They warned us about all this stuff, but nobody listened, and the world has got to where it is today. And this is through closed-minded thinking. This is through accepting ideas for how they are and not taking any sort of idea in possibility into recognition, and to just not take things at face value, or to take things at face value, I should say, which I completely disagree with. You can be an intelligent person without having to accept everything is how it is. You know, yes, water is wet, grass is green, right? Okay, so those are simple things. But that doesn't mean that they're true. That's just our view on it. It's the way we've been raised to accept and believe that. Now, I've kind of really gone off a tangent from Egypt, and I'm fascinated with Egypt. I cannot get enough of it. And I really got off tangent from where I really started was the lost civilization. I wanted to, I'll get back to it now since, it's my show. I can do what I want. Pardon me. So getting back to this lost continent, this continent that does not exist. Well, it's interesting that a lot of people think that it got sunk, but it's like people forget that there's another continent that nobody ever talks about. You rarely hear anybody discuss Antarctica. Like, seriously, when was the last time you had a discussion about Antarctica besides penguins or snow? Antarctica is a giant freaking continent that is somehow on the bottom of bottom as our view is. There's really no up or down in space, but you get the gist. It's in a part of our planet away from all other continents. It's very interesting how it is. I think Australia is one of the closer ones. So I've seen some theories that instead of Atlantis or the continent, there's different names. Some people have called it Mu, Lemuria. I don't know. I'm not a scholar when it comes to this stuff. I just find it interesting, and I've tried to talk about this kind of stuff to my friends, but they don't want to hear anything about it. They get frustrated. So I'm talking to a microphone about it, and hopefully a couple people will listen to it and might find what I'm talking about interesting, or may even be able to relate, or may even have researched stuff on the lines that I have. Anyway, so there's a theory that instead of Atlantis sinking, there was a shift in the plates. Graham Hancock I can't remember where he heard this theory from, but imagine an orange, right? And you got the skin of the orange. Now imagine if you could somehow loosen the skin of the orange from the center pulp, but the skin would still remain on, and you could somehow slide the skin around the pulp. Now there's a theory the planet does stuff like this. Like a continental shift or drift on a mega scale. That may only take who knows how long. Maybe a week, maybe a day, maybe a year. Nobody knows. There's no time machine, so we don't know. These are all theories, just along the lines as most archaeological theories are. When you go back to the pyramids and they say the pyramids were tombs, out of all the crazy theories about the Great Pyramid being a tomb, that is one of the craziest. There's absolutely not one shred of evidence that it was ever a tomb or it was designed as a tomb. That's just what we've been told. It's what makes sense to a few people, and for whatever reason, it gets bought. Now you have to remember, crazy outside the box thinking gets us to where we are today. Without crazy outside the box thinking, we would have accepted that the world was flat and that God rules everything, and that the Earth, the galaxy literally revolves around us. The Earth is the center of the universe, and that no other life. If we did not think outside the box, we would still have these ideas and thoughts. We would still be freaking cavemen, essentially. And it's a great disservice when people do not even try to expand their mind and think of other possibilities, because it's all that. It's all those people that sacrificed their name in the sake of science, in the sake of discovery, in the sake of mankind to get us where we are today. And just how and the reason that people, when people just shoot down ideas, and you don't have to say yes to an idea. When people hear ideas, they just think they have to say yes or no. You don't have to say yes or no. You say, interesting, and you log that under the other theory. All right, excuse me. Hold on. Get my mind together for a second. Wow, this is a cool. I'm having a good time with this. Hope you guys are having a good time with it. Okay, theoretical. You just, anything anybody ever says to you, just take it as theoretical and file it all under theoretical. There doesn't have to be a yes or no answer. So man, where was I on this one? I was trying to get back to the continent of Atlantis. Oh, the orange. All right, so you got the skin of the orange moving around the pulp, just like how the mantle of the earth, possibly with the inside, the I don't even know what you call it, the core or whatever. So the theory is that instead of sinking, Atlantis may be actually Antarctica, and through continental drift and shift and crazy planetary changes, it shifted from the center of the Atlantic down to the south. And, I'm not crazy, and I don't say it's the truth, but it just kind of makes sense. Cultures and cultures have talked about lost civilizations. Plato's not the only one to talk about Atlantis. He just names it Atlantis. There's other cultures that talk about lost civilizations, and this would make sense. And we haven't been able to fully explore Antarctica, because Antarctica is covered with miles and miles of ice. Like it literally is it's literally like an alien planet on our own planet. So, if another civilization did exist, and if there was a continent, as we're told there was, instead of that continent collapsing and dropping down into the ocean, perhaps it shifted. Or perhaps Australia and Antarctica were once one large landmass, and perhaps on that shifting down to the southern part of our planet, it broke apart. And that would explain why Australia has drifted off just a little bit from Antarctica. I mean, it's still a good distance away, but I mean, comparatively to America and to Europe, it's way closer to Antarctica. So that would explain the missing continent. It's not missing. It's just a continent we forget about. Nobody ever talks about Antarctica, and rarely do we talk about Australia in the modern Western world, which I find fascinating. I've been researching Australia. I actually love Australia. I've actually thought about moving to Australia. It's a fascinating place. So, getting back to the ancient civilization, this is what we're talking about. Oh boy, I totally lost my whole train of thought on that, guys. Let's see. I had ancient civilizations, lost civilizations, the buildings, the megalithic structures. Yeah, so, there's just so many similarities between these megalithic structures all across the world, divided by thousands of miles, divided by sea, and they were able to build these structures in similar ways without influence from each other. So either these people came up with ideas on their own around the same time, or, which makes a lot more sense, they were taught these ideas and techniques from an older civilization. It just makes sense. Well, people say, oh, well, there's no evidence. Oh, show me the tools. Show me this. Show me that. We're talking about extreme periods of time. We're talking about possibly 10, 20, 30, 40. We don't even know. Just extreme periods of time. And over that time, the earth digests and re-assimilates all that stuff. There could have been literally tons of stuff, tons of cities and cultures that were just wiped off the face of this planet and left no evidence at all. And that would explain why we have the lost civilization theory, why we have a problem explaining away these ancient megalithic structures, again with some stones weighing upwards of 100 plus tons. Let me put that in perspective for you. An average car is generally about a ton, ton or two, give or take. So if we're talking about 100 ton stone, imagine 100 cars compacted into that stone. Imagine that. So that's the kind of weight that these people were dealing with, and were able to move easily without wheels in most cases, without written languages in most cases. So how did they do this? This is a fascinating subject to me. I can literally probably talk about this for hours on end, but I'm not going to talk much more about it on this episode. I'm about to wrap this up. I just looked up and we're already into the 43-minute barrier, which is amazing. It seems like I've only been talking about this for like 10 minutes. I'm going to get more back onto this. This is just an off the top of my head kind of discussion about this. I kind of started earlier with, I think, paranormal in general. I really want to do shows on the paranormal too. Like I say, and UFOs. I don't believe and I don't disbelieve the stuff that we are told or the information we are taught. I just take it all at face value and realize that most of it is theoretical. The Big Bang. People say the universe was created by the Big Bang. that's a very good possibility. But the key word that gets thrown out of that statement time after time after time, and it actually infuriates me when people say this, is it's not the universe was created by the Big Bang. The universe may have been created by the Big Bang theory. It's a theory. It's still a theory to today. There's no way to prove it. It's all theoretical. People forget the definition of the word theory. They think that if somebody says something that they're either saying it is or it isn't. Well, people, in literally 98% of the cases of our reality in general, everything is theoretical. Even though you can say, yes, I picked up this stone, you can't definitively prove that stone was picked up. You can say, oh yes, well, I picked it up and I weighed it. I felt its mass. I put it under an electrospectrogram. I gave it an ECG or XYZ. But the thing is, we still can't prove our own existence. We say, yes, we can, but no, we can't. Consciousness is creating our existence. Consciousness is what makes you see the world you are today. And the whole world is, in my idea, a giant conscious bubble. Like, yes, we have individual items and people and individuals. But even ancient people thought this. Instead of thinking as everything separate, everything is one. Oh boy, I got really off tangent on that one. Anyway, so that's a taste of kind of my discussion into some crazy fringe type topics. And I'm going to end it with how people get uncomfortable when you talk about this kind of stuff. I have friends that I've tried to discuss these ideas with, and they essentially get angry at the fact that I'm even bringing up some sort of topic like this. And what's interesting is, like, I'm not saying it's one way or the other. I'm just saying, hey, this is a cool idea. Would you mind maybe, like, what do you think about this idea? Or, what's it? And to say, no, I don't have no time for aliens. I don't got no time for this and that. It's like, well, I'm not saying any of this exists. I'm just saying this is interesting stuff. Some what if scenarios. And people, for some reason, think that if you think like that, that's your entire ideology. And what you say, if you say, oh, well, I found this interesting UFO video. Oh, he believes in UFOs. Yeah. It's like, no, that's not the case at all. I've never seen a UFO. I've never seen alien. But I can look on the internet and see 1,000 years of history and more in paintings and in other works of people that have spotted strange things in the sky. So, it's not like this is a new phenomenon. A lot of people say, oh, the UFO phenomenon is from the 1950s or 1940s with the Roswell crash. And no, that's hogwash. People have been seeing objects in the skies for a long time. It's just within that time frame of the 40s, we were more technologically advanced, more just understood the workings of machines, that we started to make it more of a machine instead of something else. I'm sure back in the day it was more spiritual, like more of a spirit thing. If you saw a craft, what we call crafts, if you see, maybe it was like, oh, well, that's the bear god from up north, or that's the zebra god, or who knows. So that's about it in a nutshell for that. I got a lot more to say about this in general. Outside the box thinking, I thirst outside the box thinking. I'm so tired of everybody doing the same thing and everybody spitting out the same sound bites about modern news, presidents, economy, war, what have you. There's a lot more to life than just that. And there's some fascinating stuff out there. A lot of cool stuff. And I'm going to be going into a lot of this. Paranormal, extraterrestrial, ancient and lost civilizations, all sorts of theoretical ideas, philosophy, theology, science, biology, astrophysics, cosmology, you name it. I think cosmology is actually manicures and makeup and stuff. So yeah, I'm not gonna be talking about that one, but you get the gist of it. Interesting things. And I know there's people out there that find this stuff interesting too. And I know if they're like me, they have a hard time to discussing this stuff with other people. And that's why I like to listen to webcasts or podcasts or whatever you want to call them, about this kind of stuff. It's interesting to get ideas and thoughts on stuff that people just are uncomfortable talking about for whatever reason. It's just the way we've been raised. And with the internet, we're breaking these shackles. The internet is probably one of the greatest tools since the invention of fire. When I was a kid, if I could just sit down in my room and have the world's library in my room and be able to research anything I wanted to research at any time of the day, holy crap, I'd be such a different person than I am today. So I am fascinated to see what today's kids are going to be like in 20, 30 years. Because they're able to have a freaking world's library in their house, on their lap, in their phone. It's fascinating, people. All right, so let's see. We're going on the 50-minute mark here. It's been interesting. Been an interesting talk. And so that's going to wrap up today's segment. If you liked what I talked about today, don't worry. There's going to be a lot more of this in the future. And I find it absolutely interesting. And I'm actually finding it easier to make these shows. And as you can see, I'm in the 50-minute mark, so I'm already kind of pushing past that half an hour thing that I thought I was going to be talking about. And this is just on one little subject. So, that's going to be it for today, folks. I'm glad if you've stuck around this long, thank you very much. If you have ideas and stuff you would like to talk about, and possibly maybe even look at putting together some sort of show with me, let me know. We'll see what we can do. I'll try to figure stuff out. For now, I'm just going to be talking on my own. And, just kind of letting you guys know the how I see the world through my crazy brain. Again, insanity. Yeah, people say, oh, well, this Joe's insane or Martha's insane. You know what? Human species is insane. I got news for you, people. The human species is obviously insane. And if you don't think it's insane, all you have to do is freaking open up the internet. Just click on Yahoo and see the front page. And if you do not come to the conclusion that the world's insane from just looking at the front page of Yahoo, then, that I'm sorry. That just means that, unfortunately, you've accepted yourself into this normal society, and I refuse to be told how to think. So, going back to insanity, we're all insane. So if you're ever feeling like you're crazy or something, don't worry. You're in good company. The entire planet is insane. I think that's the cost of becoming conscious, sentient beings. From the point when we were monkeys or what have you to how we are today. To have this brain power and to be able to utilize our brain in such a fashion, insanity is just the cost. Some people are just more insane than others. And it's just how the world is, in my view. It helps to explain everything. Why is the world today? Why is the world screwed up? Because, ladies and gentlemen, the human species is insane. But thankfully, we have different levels of it. All right, folks, that's going to be it for tonight. And again, thank you for listening. If you made it this far, hope I didn't bore you to sleep. And I look forward to having my words tickle your ears on the next episode. All right. See you guys. Have a good one.